So the paper is based on a fundamental premise, and that is that supply chain managers in firms occupy kind of a unique situation, a unique position in the firms, in that they're boundary spanning workers. They're working across internal functional boundaries as well as with suppliers and customers, of course, external to the organization. So we thought, well, these folks, because of their boundary spanning roles, would have insights perhaps into what's going on in the marketplace, both technologically, demand markets, factor markets, that can be valuable in innovation, maybe directly, maybe indirectly. And so most of the prior literature has looked at direct involvement of manufacturing or logistics or purchasing people in innovation projects.
Of course.
Sorry.
That's okay. That's
what the editing function's
for.
Yeah. So turn it. So most of the prior literature has looked at functional involvement of logistics managers, purchasing managers, in innovation projects directly. We're looking more at an organizational level. Does that knowledge that resides in these boundary spanning workers, does it work its way into innovation and then affect operational outcomes? Right, so it's a survey methodology. We measured a couple of things. The interesting part of the question is not so much does involvement of these supply chain personnel somehow improve innovation processes, but it's when does it improve processes, and maybe when is it less valuable. So contingency model is really the most important part of the contribution of the paper. And we thought about two different contingency variables, one being technology, technological dynamism, and the other being the degree to which suppliers are engaged directly with or integrated into the firm's operational practices. So supply integration has been studied in a lot of other firms, or a lot of other studies. So how do we do that? Well, we have a survey, and in the survey we asked managers, supply chain managers, about their participation in new product development efforts, ideation processes, and things like that. And then we also asked about supplier integration. The nice thing about this survey was we actually knew who the respondents were, so we could do some supporting research on the companies and go look at the industries, and that's how we classified the technology dynamism variable, not using survey responses, but by using the kind of archival data there. So we married those two data sets together. Yeah, so in a nutshell, really interesting findings. Our hypotheses were mostly supported that this boundary spanning knowledge is more valuable in technologically dynamic environments, and that kind of makes sense that when things are really changing a lot, then added perspective and more information from different sources is going to be more valuable in driving innovation outcomes and operational performance that comes when you introduce new products and things like that. The interesting part of it is, though, it's only those firms that had a high level of supplier integration along with engagement of their internal supply chain workers in innovation that mattered in high-tech environments, if that makes sense. So we conceptualized that as supply chain workers being conduits of external knowledge. So in those technologically dynamic environments, they need to interact. There's a value to their interaction with suppliers over and above the kind of operational benefits that come from supply chain integration that extends to the firm's innovative activities. They're the conduit. They're collecting that, whether they're doing it intentionally or just kind of serendipitously. They're privy to lots of information and knowledge that can be used, to further the firm's innovation goals. In the low technology environment, it wasn't the case. Still, supply chain managers' involvement was valuable, was statistically significant and positive, but it really didn't depend so much on supplier integration. And our interpretation of that was, well, because things are stable, that they are experts, they're relevant experts. So we thought of them as sources of innovative knowledge in those more stable contexts, because things are not changing that much and they have experiences that are relevant and all that. Whereas in the technology dynamic environment, that integration with suppliers and being out there kind of listening to what's going on in the marketplace is really valuable. So all we've really done in this paper is establish that, okay, it's more or less valuable in different contexts. The clear takeaway is, if you're a manager and you're in one of these contexts, it gives you some direction in terms of how you might reorganize, not specifically how you might reorganize. In fact, that would be a great future research question, looking at different ways of promoting this knowledge flow. But the importance of it, and I think even more broadly, it gives supply chain managers another way to argue their value within the firm. And this is one of my biases perhaps, but too many times I think supply chain managers think only in terms of efficiencies and cost reductions, and that's really how we motivated this study, is that there's these ancillary and sometimes really important benefits and resources that supply chain functions can bring to the firm and the competitive advantage of the firm. And so I would hope that supply chain managers would take these findings and use that as an argument that their functions are really more strategic than they're sometimes viewed. Yeah, well, for me personally, this has been it's one more in a long stream of studies that have kind of looked at functional involvement, supply chain functional involvement in innovation of one type or another, either product innovation or process innovation. So it's been a nice additional step in that stream. My co-author Virpi Turkulainen is also very interested in this. So yeah, we're considering the next study. I think what we'd like to do is some case studies to drill down into answering that question. Well, how do you promote? What kind of processes, what kind of organizational structures do companies use to engage supply chain people and to capture knowledge when they integrate with their suppliers? And how does this work? What are the mechanisms behind the findings that we developed here?